how many bands were there in the 60s and 70s? You know, most times ukicheza ngoma, you play so many bands zingine hata tunazilaningi in the process. How many bands were there in the 60s and 70s?
Georgina, I can't enumerate. It's not very easy to say these are the number of bands there were. But I think in the mid 60s, there was bands from Congo, for example. There was Mzee Joseph Kabasele with African jazz, and that was now the godfather of that, you know, rumba that you are talking about. And then there were people like Victor Longomba, who were in that group, Vicky Longomba and Franco, and then Tabule, you know. And then, you know, these bands started cracking, you know, disintegrating, so to speak. And that is how people like Vicky Longomba and others ended up with OK Jazz, with Franco. And then Tabule ended up with Dr. Nico in African Fiesta. But within a very short period, Tabule and Nico separated again. There was African Fiesta National, and then African Fiesta Sukisa. And then Franco, obviously, with Vicky Longomba again separated, but OK Jazz continued to be there. And then that is when, after a while, I think it was 1969, some of the people left OK Jazz, specifically a guy called Verkis Kiamwangana, who was a sax player. Actually, he died just this December. No, in November 2022. And that is the guy who created a revolution in Congo, because Verkis formed his own band called Orchestra Veve, and then he started being like a producer of many other young bands, like bands like Lipua Lipua, there was Le Kamale, there was Orchestra Kiam, short for Kiamwangana. And then there were now bands popping up. There was Bella Bella, Fuga Fuga, there was then Ampir Bakuba by Pepe Kale, then you know, then there was Zaiko Langalanga also, the original Zaiko Langalanga, which again was very dominant, but it also disintegrated. So you, from Zaiko Langalanga, you got Langalanga Stars, you got Shock Stars, they had Anti-Shock. Then came in people like Kanda Bongo Man, because they moved abroad. People like now Diblo Dibala, Alus Mabele, Suku's Stars, Suku's Masters, Suku's. I mean, it was like kama ilipasuka. Now everybody was forming a band. In Tanzania, they had jazz bands. They had bands that represented various provinces, so to speak. So most of them, they were called jazz bands. They had like Morogoro Jazz Band from Morogoro near Dar es Salaam. They had Tabora Jazz from Mkoa wa Tabora. They had Arusha Jazz from Arusha. They had Vijana Jazz, which was more or less like a government sponsored band teaching young people how to play music. They had Da International. So they had so many bands they were calling jazz bands in Tanzania. In Kenya, as you know, we had Mzee Daudi Kabaka, we had Fadhili William, Paul Mwachupa, Fundi Konde, George Mukabi, we had David Amunga, we had Isaiah Mwinamo, then we had people like Them Mushrooms, we had Safari Sound, we had Hody Boys, we had Mzee Dio Misiani, Christopher Monyoncho, we had Kipchamba, we had people like who else have I forgotten? From Central here there were many people. Kulikuwa na mzee alikuwa na accordion, very very popular, Mwomboko style. We had people like Peter Kigia, CDM Kirato, we had Mosaimo, you know, Wahome Mainge, all these guys from around Burang especially. Then from Banana Hill, we had a guy called Francis Rugweti. These are all artists who are now coming from Central. And then we had from Ukambania, Columbia Stars, we had I've forgotten, there was a guy very very popular from Ukambani. He sang watu msicheze Kenya, nimesahau jina lake. Jina limetembea kidogo. So we had many artists that were popular. Then of course I don't know whether I've talked about the Mushrooms. There was Maroon Commandos from the army. We had the Wagoners from the army. We had the Scarlet Band from the army. We had Hody Boys. I mean, there were many bands in Kenya that were playing real good music. But you know what? I think there is this I don't know, I can't call it self-criticism. It is lack of confidence in oneself. Because I've been privileged to go to many African countries. I've been to about 37 countries in Africa. And when I listen to African music, when I listen, for example, to music in Cameroon, when I listen to Kina Samfan Thomas, Ndedie Yango, Saleh John, all those people, their music is not different from the Benga music that we listen to. When you go to Malawi, when you go to Botswana, when you go to many parts of Africa, that music is the same. You go to Zimbabwe, exactly the same. You listen to Oliver Mutukuzi, for example. That music is no different from music that is played in Kisii. Same thing. But I think it's lack of self-belief that has ruined some of the artists who are great artists. Iti kwa sababu mtu anaimba kwa lugha yake anaona ya sasa yeye ni kama hajasoma, watu hawatamtambua, watu hatamuona kama yeye ni mtu ambaye akona miziki ya maana. And that has killed the Kenyan music. And Kenyan music must wake up and know that music haina mpaka. There is no barrier. Good music is good music. It doesn't have to be sung in English or Swahili. Yes.
So Uncle, of all these bands umetaja,
yes,
ni ngapi zimesalia sai? How many are remaining?
I don't know. Of the old bands, of course, the Mushrooms is still there, alive and kicking. The others, of course, some of them have passed on since. Les Wanyika, Le Mangelepa, Mazembe, those bands are still there.